Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something really important, uh, building lasting recovery from addiction.
Yeah, and we're using a great resource, Building Recovery Resilience, that workbook by Guy Duplessis and his colleagues.
It's a 2024 Cambridge University Press book, and we're going to pull out some key ideas from it for you.
Think of it as a guide to the practical stuff inside. Our mission is really to unpack the core concept.
Exactly. Because we all know, just say no. Well, it's not always that simple, is it?
Not at all. This book takes a different angle, a more nuanced one.
It really zeroes in on a big challenge.
Yeah,
How do you handle stress? How do you deal with really painful emotions without turning back to substances for that short-term relief?
right. Because that lack of coping skills is often what makes things difficult. People want to stay sober, but relapse is, a real hurdle.
So the book introduces this central idea, recovery resilience. What does that mean in practice?
It's basically your ability to handle the tough stuff, cravings, triggers, stress, those high-risk moments using your coping skills, your self-regulation, without relapsing.
Like internal shock absorbers.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And it's tied to something else they call recovery capital.
Recovery capital, what's that about?
That's all your resources, internal and external.
Yeah.
Your skills, yeah, but also your support network, maybe where you live, job prospects, anything that supports your recovery.
Got it. So resilience is how you use those resources, and capital is the resources themselves.
Exactly. Building both is key.
Okay, so the book says there's something that can get in the way of accessing this resilience. It calls it the I system. Sounds a bit mysterious.
Hey, yeah. It's your self-referential mind-body system, basically how you relate to yourself and the world. But when it gets overactive, it can really hinder you.
Hinder how?
It can block your best thinking, block access to that natural resilience everyone has. It's like that internal noise, that tension that clouds things up when you really need clarity.
And they have a way to actually notice this happening, something called mapping.
Yes, mapping is one of their core recovery resilience practices. You start by picking a situation that's bothering you.
Okay.
Then you just kind of free associate, write down the thoughts, feelings, body sensations that come up around it. No judgment, just map it out.
So you get a picture of your I system in action for that situation.
Pretty much. Then there's a second mapping exercise.
Ah, right. What's different there?
The focus shifts. Instead of the thoughts, you tune into your senses. Like, what sounds are around you right now? What does your body actually feel like? What are you seeing?
And just doing that makes a difference.
Often, yeah. It tends to quiet down that I system chatter. The mental clutter reduces, maybe some body tension eases off. You shift towards what they call natural functioning.
Your baseline state more balanced.
Exactly. Your more resourceful self.
So when the I system is overactive,
Mhm.
what does that look like? Feel like?
It often narrows your awareness, tunnel vision almost. Makes it really hard to use your recovery capital, those skills, supports everything.
Mm-hmm.
It can distort how you see things, how you feel, what you think you can do, limits your choices, basically.
But the idea isn't to just get rid of the I system. They talk about befriending it.
That's right. It's not the enemy, it serves functions. The goal is to recognize when it's getting loud, when that mental clutter or body tension pops up.
Use it as a signal.
Precisely. Recognize I system activity. That's another practice. It's a cue to check in, see what's going on.
And what usually triggers this I system overdrive? The book mentions requirements.
Yes, requirements are huge. These are your deep-seated beliefs about how things absolutely should or must be, how you should be, how others should be, how the world should operate.
Like rigid rules.
Exactly. And when reality doesn't match those rules, when a requirement gets violated.
The I system kicks in.
Right. It perceives it as a threat, often a threat to your self-concept, and triggers that stress response.
So if I have a requirement like I must never show weakness, and then I feel vulnerable, bam.
That's a perfect example. That gap between the must and the reality can really activate the I system.
Which leads to another practice, I guess. Recognizing these things.
You got it. Recognize requirements.
Yeah.
The book has exercises to help uncover them, like mapping out how you wish someone would act or how you think you need to be. It brings those hidden shoulds and musts to light.
Sounds a bit like Stoic philosophy.
Yeah.
Focusing on your reaction, not just the event.
There's definitely a parallel. The book even quotes Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you react. But adds a twist.
It is.
It emphasizes who is reacting. Is it the overactive, requirement-driven I system? Or, by choosing to quiet that system down, can you access your innate resilience, your natural functioning, and respond differently.
Okay, that makes sense. So you choose who's in the driver's seat.
In a way, yes, you choose whether to let the I system run the show or to consciously shift towards your more resilient self.
All right, so we have the I system, the requirements that trigger it. How does this apply directly to, the really tough moments? High-risk situations, triggers for relapse.
Well, high-risk situations are basically any event or circumstance that, if you don't handle it well, could lead back to substance use.
And it's personal, right?
Yeah.
What's high risk for me might not be for someone else.
Absolutely critical point. It's your subjective perception of the risk that matters most.
And can you use that mapping exercise here too?
Definitely. You map your thoughts and feelings about a specific high-risk situation, first just letting it flow, which shows the I system's influence,
Okay.
and then doing it again while focusing on your senses. The contrast usually highlights how much the I system was amplifying the distress or the craving.
You'd also look for those requirements hiding in the thoughts you mapped out.
Yes, exactly. Circling any should or must statements on your map helps you identify the specific requirements that are being triggered in that high-risk context, making you feel more vulnerable.
So that sensory awareness thing, just noticing sights, sounds, body sensations, that can actually help when a craving hits hard.
It really can. It acts as an anchor to the present moment. It helps quiet the I system's panic or urgency, shifting you back towards natural functioning.
Gives you a different way to cope right then and there.
Yes, an alternative to immediately reacting to the stress, the negative feelings, the anxiety that often comes with cravings.
And how does it help break the link with cravings specifically in recovery?
By practicing sensory awareness, you get better at noticing the triggers for cravings earlier, seeing them, feeling them arise, without automatically jumping to the old behavior.
It creates a pause, a moment of choice.
Exactly. That pause allows you to choose a different response, something other than using. It helps rest the I system temporarily and weakens that automatic link over time.
This sounds like more than just observing thoughts, though. Like there's understanding involved.
Right. The book calls it metacognition, thinking about your thinking. It's not just noticing the craving, but understanding how the I system is generating it, the stories it's telling, how they link back to those requirements. It's self-understanding.
Okay. The book also talks about an addicted mode. What's that? And how do you know if you're slipping into it?
Think of addicted mode as a whole way of being, the mindset, the beliefs, the attitudes, even the fantasies that support addictive behavior. It's like a default setting you can fall back into.
And it has warning signs.
Definitely. Things like stinking thinking, those justifications for using, changes in how you relate to yourself or others or the world, maybe isolating, getting resentful. Recognizing these signs early is crucial for prevention.
And triggers for this mode, they can be external things, like places, or internal too.
Both. External are the obvious ones, people, places, things associated with past use. Internal triggers are your own feelings, thoughts, maybe stress, boredom, loneliness, even sometimes positive feelings you used to enhance with substances.
And mapping these helps pinpoint the requirements involved.
Yes, mapping the trigger helps see the associated thoughts and often reveals the underlying I system requirements that make that trigger so potent for you.
Seems like a lot to keep track of. Does the book suggest how?
It strongly recommends a recovery resilience journal, a place to track those addicted mode warning signs, but also to note which recovery resilience practices you're using and how they're working for you. Build self-awareness.
Okay, let's go deeper into the I system's mechanics. It mentions these subsystems, the depressor and the fixer. What are they?
They're presented as parts, or maybe functions, of the I system. The depressor is the part involved in negative thinking, rumination, that inner critic.
The one that spins negative stories.
Exactly. And those stories often get amplified when your requirements aren't met. It keeps you stuck in worry, self-blame, judgment.
What kind of stories does it usually tell?
Often they revolve around feeling fundamentally flawed, not good enough. This fuels that deep, toxic shame. It's corrosive.
And I imagine this gets really loud after a slip-up, a lapse or relapse.
Oh, absolutely. The depressor goes into overdrive then. Piles on the guilt, shame, hopelessness, which tragically can make further relapse more likely as you try to escape those feelings. It's a vicious cycle.
So how do you deal with it? There's a practice called diffuse depressor storylines.
Yes. The first step is just recognizing when the depressor is active, noticing those negative thought patterns,
Just noticing.
and then labeling them, mentally saying, that's the depressor talking, or depressor storyline. That simple act of naming it creates distance. It reduces its power and helps you shift back towards natural functioning.
Okay, makes sense. And the fixer, what's its job?
The fixer often comes in response to the depressor. It tries to fix the bad feelings, the shame that the depressor stirred up
How?
by generating plans, goals, schemas, often really elaborate ones, driven by trying to make those violated requirements finally come true so you'll feel okay again.
So if the depressor says you're useless, the fixer says, okay, here's a 10-point plan to become hyperproductive and prove you're not.
Something like that, yeah. But fixer behavior is often extreme, all or nothing, unrealistic expectations. And sometimes the fix it comes up with is the addictive behavior itself, a quick but ultimately damaging way to escape the bad feelings.
And there's a similar practice, diffuse fixer storylines.
Same principle. Become aware when the fixer is generating these grand, often frantic plans. Label the thoughts. Fixer activity, fixer storyline. You don't have to argue with it or follow its plan. Just notice it. That helps break the cycle with the depressor.
The book also connects this to basic human needs, doesn't it?
It does, referencing Max Neef's model, needs like connection, autonomy, meaning. The idea is that the fixer schemes, and even addiction itself, are often misguided attempts to meet these needs.
But they don't really work.
Right. They're called pseudo-satisfiers or even destroyers because they offer temporary relief at best, but don't truly fulfill the need and often cause more harm.
So this back and forth, depressor creates pain, fixer tries to escape it, often fails, depressor attacks again. That's what keeps people stuck.
That's a big part of how the I system can keep someone trapped in addicted mode, yes. Fueled by those violated requirements. Recognizing that depressor-fixer dance in your own life is a key practice.
Let's circle back to the requirements again. They seem central. The book even links them to the Big Book of AA.
Yeah, it points out how the Big Book warns against expectations, which are very much like these I system requirements. Unmet expectations leads to resentment, and resentment is seen as poison for recovery.
Expectations are premeditated resentments. I've heard that.
Exactly. It captures how these rigid shoulds set us up for suffering when reality inevitably doesn't conform.
So a lot of our pain comes not just from events, but from fighting reality because it doesn't match our internal rules.
That's a huge piece of it. Recovery involves, in part, learning to accept what is, letting go of some of those unrealistic demands on ourselves, others, and the world, reducing that need for control that often drives addiction.
And these requirements directly fuel the difficult moments, the triggers.
Absolutely. They underlie why certain situations feel high risk. Being able to spot and diffuse the requirement in the heat of the moment is crucial for navigating those times without relapse.
Does the book categorize these requirements?
It does. It talks about requirements about the self, how I should think, feel, act, requirements about others, how people must treat me or behave, and requirements about the world, how life or events ought to unfold.
And the mapping helps uncover which ones are active for you.
Right, in different areas of your life.
Social support comes up here too. How do requirements affect relationships and recovery?
Good social support is vital, we know that. But holding rigid requirements about how others should support you or how relationships must be can really damage those connections. It leads to disappointment, conflict, maybe isolation.
Undermining the very support you need.
Exactly. So learning healthier, more realistic expectations in relationships is part of building resilience.
And you mentioned 12-step programs. How do they fit with letting go of requirements?
The supportive environment of meetings, working the steps. It often helps people gradually soften those rigid defenses and unrealistic expectations. Connecting with others, finding acceptance, developing a healthier self-view, it all helps lessen the grip of those demanding shoulds.
So the overall aim is to weave all these practices, mapping, sensory awareness, recognizing and diffusing requirements, depressor-fixer work into daily life.
That's the goal, yes. Consolidating them into a regular recovery resilience practice. It's like building a muscle. It helps keep the I system from hijacking you and makes it easier to access your recovery capital when challenges arise.
And it shifts the focus away from constantly trying to fix yourself.
That's a really profound point in the book. Addiction limits freedom, right? Recovery is about reclaiming that freedom, moving towards self-actualization. It's less about fixing flaws, more about recognizing your inherent worth.
Even with powerlessness over substances, you have power over choosing recovery.
Precisely. The practice supports a shift from constantly doing things to feel okay, towards just being, knowing you are okay fundamentally.
Okay, let's try and pull this together. What are the absolute key takeaways for someone listening?
I'd say understanding the I system, how its requirements trigger it, and how that can block recovery through things like the depressor-fixer cycle. And then, knowing there are practical tools, the recovery resilience practices like mapping, sensory awareness, diffusing requirements, diffusing storylines to help shift out of that I system overdrive and into natural functioning. That's how you build resilience.
That's really clear. Was there one insight from all this that particularly struck you?
Hmm. I think the idea of addiction as being sort of held captive by the I system's demands and recovery as a path to freedom from those internal demands, that reframes it powerfully. Also, the idea that you don't need to eliminate your flaws, but befriending your inner world is actually the path to strength. That's quite counterintuitive but resonant.
Yeah, definitely. And how can people apply these ideas, even if they aren't specifically in addiction recovery?
Well, the core concepts, noticing stress responses, understanding your expectations, shoulds and musts, learning ways to manage difficult thoughts and feelings through awareness that's useful for anyone facing life's stresses. Identifying your own requirements in any challenging area could be a really eye-opening first step for anyone listening.
Great point. So a final thought for our listeners to chew on.
Maybe think about a recent time you felt distressed. Can you identify any requirements you were holding on to in that moment, any shoulds or musts? And then just imagine for a second, what if you had consciously shifted your focus to your senses right then? How might that have changed things? Just something to ponder.
That's a fantastic exercise. And look, if this resonates, the book, Building Recovery Resilience, has much more detail and many exercises. Definitely worth checking out. We'd love to hear what other aspects of inner resilience you're curious about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.